Quick disclaimer guys, this review will contain spoilers for the first season, and if you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend you do so. Link will be in the description below. A battle of the brains and outsmarts in a complex web of deductions and executions is the kind of enjoyment mystery nuts like myself live for. And as of yet, that is exactly what Yuukoku no Moriarty Season 2, as a remade retelling of the most popular detective story there is, promises to deliver. While at its peak, that is exactly what it delivers on. It unfortunately also comes packaged with some noticeable lows, and an ending that fell harder than an executioner's axe at a chopping block. As both a die-hard fan of Sherlock Holmes and a fan of mystery myself, Yuukoku no Moriarty was a series that had me hooked from the get-go. It didn't let me go even a single time during its first season. And unlike that first season, however, Season 2 was a rollercoaster of emotions. At its best, it had my jaw wide open, with goosebumps much more than the first season ever did. At its worst, however, it just had me groaning in disbelief. And the less said about its ending, the better. Season 2 takes another brave decision in taking the series in a direction that the first season didn't do. While Season 1 started showing the side of the story of the Moriarty family and their carefully planned executions in taking out the nobles that deserved it, Season 2 on the other hand starts off with Sherlock's perspective while presenting some of his most interesting cases. But these are actually rewritten and reorganized. The good news is, these rewritten cases are not inferior to its original works in the slightest, and the strength of the writing scene in the series before this is still present full force here. And while the introduction of some of the most interesting characters in the original works had me very interested, the direction it takes with some of them I was not okay with. As expected, the series manages to bring some big names in, like the Mistress of Disguise and Manipulation Irene Adler, the King of Blackmailers Charles Augustus Milverton, and even the missing members of Sherlock's posse, like the face of his very reliable information network Biggins, and amusingly Sherlock's very own canine sniffer Toby. While I absolutely loved the alternate direction the series took with events like the fate of Milverton, which I won't be spoiling, the direction it took with some characters like Irene Adler I did not. While out of context, I will say she ended up becoming a completely different character from another very popular work from the writer Ian Fleming. What ticked me off about not only Irene but even the rest of the new additions is that they were not given enough time on screen to be as relevant as the others in the series, even though they ended up feeling much more interesting than they were initially are. I would have let this go if the series was long running as it should have been, but its abrupt conclusion just made the former stick out much more. Of course, if the title is to be believed, this is a story centered around the Lord of Crime more than the world's greatest detective. But that side also sees a bit of a mix-up this time around. For the side of the Moriartys, even they have some rewritten cases that they take part in. The key difference here is that these cases are ones that Sherlock originally takes part in, and here, it's William who takes center stage. On the side of the Moriarty's experience, it isn't short of moments that will have your hair standing on its ends, with specific moments like the excellent White Knight in London case, and the flashback involving the much younger William going against a wealthy noble merchant. These moments were the series at its peak, and it far outdoes the already sky-high high points of the first season. And while both sides have some truly excellent rewritten cases like A Scandal in the British Empire, Signs of Mary, and even the aforementioned White Knight in London, the infamous Jack the Ripper case was butchered beyond recognition. I was all down for it since this was the first time it was centered around William to solve it, but it was the only case that relied on generic shonen logic, rather than the careful planning and outplays that followed the other cases. The other gripe I had with Season 2 was its ending. At the pace it was going, this was dead set to be a long-running series which was supposed to at least have 2 other healthy seasons. But it's as if at the last moment they just wanted to finish the whole thing, so they just shoehorned an arc in to fast-track everything and arrive at the end by 2 episodes. I won't spoil how it ended, but all I will say is that while the story wrapped up satisfyingly, the fate of William and Sherlock had me scratching my head wondering what the hell I just watched. It's a shame too, since this was one of the most darkest and impactful moments in the original works. While I previously praised the first season for its character depth, that is something I cannot do for season 2. While it doesn't do injustice to the already established characters, it certainly doesn't do anything to add to them. The new additions like Irene Nadler, Mycroft Holmes, and Jack Renfield ain't given enough time to come to the level of characters like Albert and Louise from the first season. The only exception to this rule is Charles Augustus Milverton, who remained to be a threatening presence until the very end. Even the two at the heart of the series only see some significant character changes by the last 2 episodes, in which at the time the series pacing was faster than a racehorse on steroids, so unfortunately said changes just falls onto blind eyes. But even so, this is still the Sherlock and Moriarty I always wanted their media portrayals to be, and the fact that Soma Saito's William and Makoto Furukawa's Sherlock being my favorite among them all remains the same. Once again, just as Production IG delivered on the first season, they deliver here as well, with the full package of colors bleeding out, only leaving the sharp colors of blood and eyes behind, which, no matter how much times they do, always succeeds in ramping up the tension of the moment. And it's also followed by excellent visual design for interiors, and the smoke-ridden blackened city of London in the evening never gets old to look at. Character models old and new still look as good as I recall them to be, from the design to their animation during fight scenes, which also hold a very high degree of consistency. The first season was already one of Production IG's highlights when it comes to visuals, and season 2 remains the same. Yuukoku to Moriarty season 2 is like a roller coaster ride on a track with an occasional loose rail. Once it gains momentum and reaches its peak with its most excellent writing back up with its visual tricks, it's a series like none other. The moment it hits one of those loose rails with its poor Jack the Ripper rewrite and its abrupt ending, it will have you screaming. But even though it has its occasional flaw, it is still undoubtedly the best depiction of the world's greatest detective and his arch-nemesis the Lord and Crime to date. While it intentionally misses the opportunity to be greater than it already was, it's a crusade worth experiencing, as its narrative and presentation still stands out compared to many other mystery properties out there.